Dakar. Promoting dialogue. It's May Day in Dakar, 1 o'clock in Cotonou. Good afternoon and many thanks for staying tuned to West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM and around the world on wadr.org. Welcome to Newslink. Here are the top stories. Calls intensify for peace in Senegal amid growing political tensions ahead of the November 17 parliamentary elections.
We dislodge violence between Pasef and Samusakadu.
They attack the population. That is not good for... This is only politics, but you have to do it with peace, to be careful. They have not to make problem for this.
Malian authorities investigate the Secretary General of the Prison Guards Union for attempts to destabilize the country. Burkina Faso reflects on 10 years of a popular uprising against former President Blaise Compaoré. And a new WATSI report says democracy in West Africa faces an existential threat.
This has become an existential threat for our region. Democracy is in decline, and that is one of the things that we have to address our minds to.
Please stay tuned for details of these stories and more.
Here is Augustine Colley with Newslink.
Many thanks for joining us and welcome to our listeners in the Gambia, Ghana, Liberia and Sierra Leone. This edition begins with Senegal as citizens are calling for peace amid growing political tensions and attacks ahead of the November 17 parliamentary elections. Despite the pockets of violence, citizens remain in high spirit to participate in the democratic process and elect the country's 165 members into the House of National Assembly, representing various constituencies. In an interview with WADR, some Senegalese condemned the recent attack at the Samsakadu coalition's headquarters, while urging political parties and their followers to always consider the best interest and sovereignty of the nation. Christopher, teacher, completes the story.
The commencement of the political campaign on Sunday, 27th October, ahead of the keenly contested November 17 legislative election, was marked with some tensions and attacks. First was the Samsakadu coalition headquarters, where some unidentified individuals stormed and ransacked the facility. Ousmane Diallo is in charge of the premises.
We have heard a candidate making threats against our coalition, against our leader ahead of the list, who is battling in the mayor of Dakar. So we know where it comes from.
A newly elected National Assembly will enable President Bassirou Diomaye Faye have a well-constituted government to replace the recently dissolved House of Representatives.
I'm
dissolving the National Assembly to ask the sovereign people for the institutional means that will allow me to give substance to the systemic transformation that I promised them.
Just 5 days into the campaign trail, tempers are high, indicative of possible incidents. In an interview, some Senegalese expressed their desire to exercise their franchise at the polls. However, they have called for cooler heads to prevail among political actors and leaders in the best interest of the nation.
We dislodge violence between Pasef and Samusakadu.
They attack the population. That is not good for... This is only politics, but you have to do it with peace, to be careful. They have not to make problem for this. It's not good.
The new assembly is expected to repeal the old laws drawn up by the old regime.
Senegal remains one of the beacons of West Africa's democratic pedigree. Hence, all lenses are focused on the nation for another peaceful election in the coming weeks.
Christopher, a teacher with that report. In Guinea, more than half of the political parties have been dissolved by the Ministry of Territorial Administration, while others have been suspended for 3 months. The authority in charge of regulation indicates that those political parties are not in order following several months of evaluation. The Ministry of Territorial Administration also placed the other half of political parties under surveillance, including the former ruling party, the RPG, and the UFDG of opposition Cellou Dalein Diallo. The question that arises at this moment is what the consequences could be on the political field. There are growing reactions to the government's decision.
Pour ceux qui sont dissous, ça veut dire que ceux-là n'existeront plus. Pour ceux qui ont été suspendus,
For those who have been dissolved, it means they no longer exist. For those who have been suspended, they will not be able to carry out activities for the next 3 months, and many of them might also end up being dissolved, naturally, as a consequence of the authorities' decision. This will create a kind of void. If among these dissolved or suspended parties, there are those who were potential candidates, it reduces the number of opponents. One might wonder if those under observation will have the serenity, clarity, and peace of mind over the next 3 months to consider a potential candidacy. It's as if they are being occupied while the country is practically in a campaign mode, with support activities going on throughout the country, particularly for the president of the transition. This creates an uneven playing field where some are free to campaign and travel across the country, while others must focus on addressing various issues to get their political parties recognized. If amid major actions, the finalization of the transition is accelerated, it naturally would not allow the second category to face the situation effectively.
Growing reactions to the dissolution of several political parties in Guinea. Over to Côte d'Ivoire, 1 year before the 2025 presidential election, potential candidates are beginning to come out. This is the case of Jean-Louis Billon, a member of the Democratic Party of Côte d'Ivoire, who recently announced his candidacy for next year's presidential election. But what do Ivorians think of what we call the PDCR candidacy war? Our correspondent in Abidjan, Abin Adey, has gathered some reactions in this report voiced by Imo Edit.
While Jean-Louis Billon, a PDCI executive, declared last week that the 2025 presidential election will not take place without him, the leadership of his party is proclaiming the candidacy of Tidjane Cham, the party president. For this political party, Tidjane Cham remains the PDCI's natural candidate for the October 2025 presidential election. The situation is becoming increasingly tense and is causing Ivorians to react. Some believe that this war between the country's oldest party is not a good sign.
This type of rhetoric claiming to be the future of action is not good news for the PDCI. We cannot afford to be complacent in the face of such actions. A conflict of this nature is a distraction that can lead to chaos. For the PDCI, this is not a positive signal. As we approach a major deadline, we must demonstrate unity and solidarity. It is clear that he is running for office, but he is not the PDCI's candidate. This will first require a discussion of the issues. It could ultimately work in favor of the PDCI.
Others say they understand Jean-Louis Billon's decision, but hope that a solution will be found quickly.
Initially, the president assumed the intermediary role, seeing himself as a French counterpart. Success, however, was not achieved, obviously. I truly hope they will work together for the good of the party.
According to a PDCI spokesperson, Soumaïla Bredoumi, the approach of a group of MPs who recently met Jean-Louis Billon to try to dissuade him from running in the 2025 presidential election was unsuccessful.
That was Abidjan correspondent Albin Adet's report, voiced by Imo Edit.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
We now move into the Sahel region, particularly in Burkina Faso. A country ravished by a multifaceted catastrophe is today reflecting on a popular uprising a decade ago that led to the resignation of former President Blaise Compaoré. On this day in 2014, the Burkinabe people bravely rose against the autocratic regime established by Compaoré following the assassination of the revolutionary leader Captain Thomas Sankara. Some print media in the country described those days as a monumental and historic mobilization, with over 1 million people taking to the streets of Ouagadougou shouting slogans with various messages. Abdullahi Hassan takes a look at the uprising.
The popular uprising in Burkina Faso in October 2014 was sparked by attempts to amend the constitution, allowing Blaise Compaoré to extend his 27-year rule. Protests driven by civil society and youth escalated on October 30, 2014, culminating in riots, the burning of government buildings and involvement of former Defense Minister Kwame Luge. Faced with growing unrest, Compaoré dissolved the government and declared a state of emergency before fleeing to Côte d'Ivoire on October 31. General Honoré Nabire Traoré was named interim leader, but Lieutenant Colonel Yakuba Zida also claimed this role, citing Traoré's unpopularity. The military supported Zida, while opposition parties rejected the coup. Following smaller protests on November 2, the African Union demanded an end to military rule by mid-November. A framework for transitional government was agreed upon shortly after. The uprising directly responded to Compaoré's attempts to circumvent constitutional term limits, which had been established in 2000 to limit presidents to 2 5-year terms. These restrictions were not retroactive, enabling Blaise Compaoré to seek re-election in 2005 and 2010. His last push for a constitutional amendment to lift term limits ignited the demonstrations. At the end of a trial that lasted a year, and in the absence of Blaise Compaoré, who had taken refuge in Côte d'Ivoire, he was sentenced in absentia to life imprisonment, as was his chief of staff. However, a decade on, Burkina Faso, according to experts and observers, remains in a similar cycle of leadership crisis and a constitutional change of government, adding to a layer of general insecurity and poverty.
Abdullahi Hassan with that report. Crossing over to Mali, where the prosecutor for cybercrime has announced the opening of an investigation against Commander Dauda Konate. The Secretary General of the Prison Guards Union is accused of destabilizing the country in an audio recording attributed to him while he has been missing for several days. WADR's Bamako correspondent Aliyu Cham fight this report, voiced by Eche Atisu.
In a statement, the prosecutor of the National Cybercrime Unit indicated that an investigation has been opened against Commander Dauda Konate. According to the statement, the Secretary General of the Autonomous Union of Prison Guards is suspected of making statements inciting the destabilization of the transition. In an audio recording that has gone viral on social media, a voice attributed to Commander Dauda Konate calls for the overthrow of the Republic's institutions. These statements are considered by the specialized cybercrime prosecutor as threats to state security. The statements also contain defamatory and false elements attributed to public authorities, it added. Given the seriousness of the allegations against Commander Dauda Konate, the cybercrime prosecutor has opened an investigation to shed light on this matter and to identify the perpetrators and accomplices of this act. As a reminder, the head of the prison guards and nurse Famousa Fomba have been missing since last week. The union sections of the prison guards and the judiciary had decided to go on strike on Tuesday until they were found. The union has since called off their strike, announcing that they have begun discussions with the relevant authorities to secure the release of their colleagues. Furthermore, the Minister of Justice has indicated that he will be more involved in ensuring the return of the two unionists to
Bamako correspondent Aliyu Cham's report, voiced by Eche Atisu. In Liberia, 9 months into President Joseph Boakar's administration, Liberians are voicing serious concerns about a rise in corruption cases. This comes as President Boakar launches a performance management and compliance system to track corrupt cases within government ministries and agencies. Grace Joshua in Monrovia completes the story.
As matters of corruption continue to rise in Liberia, businessman Emmett Hammond, speaking in an exclusive interview, has accused public officials of engaging in corrupt practices, particularly within agencies like the Liberia Drugs Enforcement Agency, the Liberia Refugee Repatriation and Resettlement Commission. This growing content signals a call for the public for transparency, accountability, and relief from the economic hardship many Liberians face.
We go in the system, we loot the system. You see what happened in El RC. You see what happened there in Boakar government. We in now most time, you can see corruption walking. We all fear and favor. So the president said, stay strong too. We are the president for the president because to make decision, it will take a lot of time before you make decision.
To combat these corruption cases, President Wadr on Wednesday launched the Performance Management and Compliance System, issuing a firm warning against corruption, while declaring that abuse of public trust will not be tolerated. With the lot of alleged corruption hanging over some government ministry and agency, including the Liberia Drugs Enforcement Agency and the Liberia Refugee Repatriation and Resettlement Commission, President Wadr called for action based on facts, not rumors, stressing that due process will be upheld in all corruption investigations.
Because of our conduct, our misuse of resources, our taking resources and thinking that life is all about ourselves. We're telling people that the resources of this country are for everybody.
The ongoing program is bringing together Sarah's head of government, agency, ministries, and international partners in supporting Liberia path through accountability and transparency. For West Africa Democracy Radio, I'm Grace Joshua in Morocco.
You are listening to Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Here is a reminder of the top stories. Calls intensify for peace in Senegal amid growing political tensions ahead of the November 17 parliamentary elections. Malian authorities investigate the Secretary General of the Prison Guards Union for attempts to destabilize the country. Burkina Faso reflects on 10 years of a popular uprising against the former President Blaise Compaoré. Still ahead in the news, a new WASI report says democracy in West Africa faces an existential threat. We also have the press review, guest interview, and sports news. Please stay with us.
Fresh and breaking news all the time. Hear it first as the news breaks, only on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
Many thanks for staying with us. As a reminder, we're streaming live on YouTube at WADR and on Facebook, WADR English Service. The West Africa Civil Society Institute has raised serious concerns over the state of democracy in West Africa, labeling its decline as an existential threat to the region. Speaking at the presentation of the Environmental Assessment of Civic Space in West Africa 2023 report, Executive Director Nana Asanwa Afasedu called for urgent action to reinforce democratic structures and improve civic freedoms. Usma Umara in Abuja reports.
In an interview during the West Africa Civil Society Week held in Abuja, Ms. Afachinu highlighted the pressing need for bodies such as ECOWAS to address what she described as regional democratic backslide. She urged ECOWAS to enhance the enforcement capacity of the Court of Justice, citing cases where the court's judgments were not enforced at the national level.
This has become an existential threat, I believe, for our region. Democracy is in decline, and that is one of the things that we have to address our minds to. Strengthening the role of the ECOWAS Court of Justice, because you would have heard that some judgments have been made, but they have not been enforced in the different countries. There needs to be certain structures put in place in the national countries that would align and then enable the enforcement of judgments from the ECOWAS Court of Justice. And this has not been done.
The report also underscored the necessity of regional standards for press and internet freedoms, with Afachinu emphasizing the importance of establishing benchmarks to safeguard democratic rights, including freedom of expression, assembly, and association. In further discussions of the report, WACS's head of policy influencing and advocacy, Omolara Balogun, shed light on the report's methodological approach, which combined both qualitative and quantitative research. This approach, she explained, enabled WACSI to document incidents such as protests, casualties, and internet shutdowns throughout 2023 compared to previous years. Balogun emphasized the diverse challenges faced across the region, noting that experiences varied widely. She concluded by calling for increased international and regional pressure on countries experiencing democratic erosion, particularly Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger.
One important thing that we need to take away from this place is the fact that we need to mount pressure on these four countries to reconsider their path to democracy, because it's always easier, cheaper, and faster to consolidate, to repair democracy than to have to start it all over again.
The findings of WACS's report, many experts agree, is a reflection of the current complexities facing West African nations as they strive to protect civic space and ensure democratic freedoms for all citizens. For Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, Usman Omar Reporting from Abuja.
This is the newspaper review. Stay abreast and find out what the top stories are in your country.
This is the newspaper review.
The newspaper review.
Let's now join Nadiri Titi in the Ghanaian capital, Accra, for the press review.
The Daily Graphic newspaper front page, 4 vacant seats in Parliament. Supreme Court dismisses Speaker's application. Also here on the front page, Ghana grows to support 90,000 tailors and dressmakers with skills. Now to the Ghanaian Times newspaper front page at 53rd Cadet Officers Graduation. We need fair and firm election policing. That's according to the Vice President. Also on the front page, cerebral palsy and autism sufferers, targets of sexual abuse in Achimtafo. Other stories here on the front page of the Ghanaian Times newspaper, Boku conflict, CJ orders closure of 7 courts in the Upper East region. The Daily Guide newspaper front page, Vice President Lord's IGP for police reforms. Also on the front page, let's debate, Bawumia fires back at Mahama. MP's vacant seats, Supreme Court throws out Speaker. That'll be it for the Daily Guide newspaper. Now to the Daily Post newspaper front page, 2024 elections is about the economy, not your irrelevant 50 questions. Mahama slams Bawumia. Other stories here, your actions have become the storm. Ghana stands in your eye. Senor Hosi to the Chief Justice. Also on the front page, Supreme Court was totally wrong. Martin Kpebu slams suspension of Speaker's ruling. And final one here, Supreme Court has become predictable. That's according to Ansa Asare, a former director of the Ghana School of Law. Now to the Chronicle newspaper front page, Dampare is a visionary leader. He has brought tangible results since assuming office, as according to the Vice President, Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia. Other stories here, Supreme Court throws out Bagbin. Other stories here, NDC failed to recognize contributions of Volta region. And the final story here, Gridco holds unauthorized excavation under high tension lines in Ayawaso West. That will be it for what the dailies are reporting today. It's back to you.
Thank you, Nadiri Titi, for the press review.
Politics, analysis on major news, social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
While the electoral campaign in Senegal enters day 5 in view of the early legislative election scheduled for November 17 this year, Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko, head of the ruling PASTEF party, was in Kaolack in central Senegal on Wednesday. Meanwhile, the coalition led by Dakar Mayor Barthélémy Dias is organizing a meeting in Tambacounda in the eastern region, while the coalition led by former President Macky Sall, which is mobilizing remotely, was yesterday in Kébémer in the Louga region. Our guest this afternoon is Mamadou C. Abbott, a Senegalese political analyst.
Ce qu'on constate, c'est le déplacement.
What we are seeing is the movement towards interior of the country, of patriotic movement. The head of the list, Ousmane Sonko, made the opening in tears. So, there is a movement going from Dakar towards the interior. On the other hand, the opposition candidates, we started in Dakar, when I took the case to the former Prime Minister Amadou Ba, who started in Djodjiawe. Macky Sall and his coalition also remained in Dakar. Barthélémy is also in Dakar, which means that the major political forces in any case share 2 approaches. There is an approach that started in Dakar, the capital, and the other approach to power that started inside the country. Now, the other candidates, we still hear very little about them. There aren't really any big meetings.
Given the mobilizations we see on both sides, could PASTEF have the majority?
In any case, what I would say is that the liability is in the campaign. When you see the first day, the head of the list of all the departments in Dakar, then Department of Tivawan of TS. The second day, they are in Imbo. There is hegemony when there is the imprint of PASTEF. With the mobilization that we are seeing with the influence of PASTEF as well, we feel that there is an electoral support. It will not be surprising that this advance could in any case give an electoral gain to PASTEF, especially when we do not feel the opposition on the grounds now. Anyway, it's 3 weeks and it's going to be long. If the PASTEF maintains this pace, it still risks swinging public opinion to its side.
Si le PASTEF maintient ce rythme-là, il risque quand même de faire basculer l'opinion de son côté.
Qui réunit des cadres de l'opposition et quand même
So, at the level of the electorate, are these mayors still representatives?
Je crois pas. Si vraiment le score...
Cohabitation, I don't think so. If really the legislative elections confirm PASTEF's score in the presidential election, PASTEF will have a majority as it demands an overwhelming majority if there is a confirmation of the Senegalese vote. If we look at the appearance of local authorities, the mayors are controlled by the former presidential majority. So at the level of the electorate, are the mayors still representative? That's a big question. Will there be no transhumans? In my opinion, it is unlikely that the intercoalition will be able to overcome the shortcomings of the Senegal's department.
S'imposer sur les 46 départements du Sénégal.
Former President Macky Sall will not be there to campaign. So what impact could this have on the coalition he heads?
C'est déjà un mauvais départ quand même.
It's already a bad start anyway. The president has been announced and it's certain that it will not be in the days to come. It will have a psychological impact. If the party which does not have a leader to replace the president of APE, that's difficult. The absence of Macky Sall will wane on the leadership of his coalition and his list. So no longer at the level of this former majority, there is a psychosis. There is even a stampede, I would say. With this transhumans movement, with also this resignation that is at the level of peace, the absence of Macky Sall will still have an impact on peace, on the coalition, and even on the voters who were there for the past 12 years.
Sur la coalition et même sur les électeurs qu'il a eu pendant 12 ans.
He's Mamadou C. Abodo, Senegalese political analyst in conversation with Demba Amaan. Up next is Sports with Sankule Janko.
Hello out there, a warm welcome and thank you for joining us. Nigeria's under-20 football team, the Flying Eagles, have successfully defended their WAFU B under-20 title after a 2-1 victory over Ghana in the final on Wednesday at the Stade Dakar in Lomé, Togo. Paragbo Ariehi was the hero of the day after scoring a brace for the Flying Eagles in a thrilling encounter. The forward scored the first goal in the 35th minute before he doubled Nigeria's lead shortly before half-time. Ghana pulled one back in the second half, but the Nigerians held their nerves to cross over the line to seal the victory. And the Libyan Football Federation, LFF, has vowed to go to the highest level of litigation to have their sanctions by Confederation of African Football, CAF, overturned. This comes after the African Football Governing Body fined the Libyan Football Federation $50,000 and forfeiting 3 points after their Nations Cup qualifier against Nigeria was cancelled. Nigeria boycotted the fixture after their plane was diverted from landing in Benghazi and kept in a locked, abandoned airport for 15 hours. CAF's decision to sanction Libya did not go down well with the Football Federation that says it will appeal the decision. Libya Football Federation acting president Abdel Nasser Ahmed was quoted as saying, "Match points cannot be awarded in this way." It remains to be seen what will be Libya's next steps in this saga. And that's it for sports. It's back to you.
We've come to the end of this edition of Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to Mustafa Sek and Maodo Ju for the technical support. I am Augustine Kali. Good afternoon.
And many thanks